Welcome to Dictators v Democrats. I am Theo Allthorpe-Mullis, and this is my charming co-host, Erik. I want to talk about Putin's war machine and about some difficulties it may soon be facing. It runs on one main thing: oil money. Senator John McCain called Russia a gas station masquerading as a country. And for all the tanks, drones, and propaganda, none of it moves without the cash that Russia earns from exporting oil. And in a surprising twist, Donald Trump, US President and the man who once praised Putin, questioned NATO, and called Ukrainian President Zelensky a dictator without elections, appears to be taking aim directly at Russia's oil reserves. Trump's pushing a dramatic shift in US energy policy, designed not just to pump American oil, but to crush Russian exports. Today, we're going to ask, why is targeting Russian oil the key, or one of the keys, to ending Putin's war in Ukraine with a defeat for Russia? And why is Trump doing it now? And could this be one of the policies, one of the arrows in the quiver that finally breaks the Kremlin? Russia is one of the world's top three oil producers. And while it's sanctioned by the West, it's still raking in tens of billions of dollars every year. In fact, 40% of Russia's federal budget in 2024 came from fossil fuels. And that's money that's used to fund the war in Ukraine. That is the mass slaughter of Ukrainian citizens and the illegal invasion of their country for imperialistic and genocidal purposes, but also suppress dissent at home. We saw enormous numbers of arrests. We've seen the rise of FSB prisons that very much mirror the Lubyanka and the KGB of old times in the Cold War, and also to keep Putin's oligarchs and the military loyal through enormous wads of cash. Europe has cut back. It still buys far too much, in my opinion, but it is getting there. But countries like India and China, enormous growing economies, are still buying up Russian crude at a discount. That discount being because the Russians are forced to sell it at a discount. But this keeps the cash flowing. And India is the biggest buyer of seaborne crude oil from Russia, importing around 1.75 million barrels per day of Russian oil from January to June this year, which is up 1% from a year ago. And China's imports from Russia reflect that. In April 2025 alone, oil shipments from Russia to China surged 20%, crossing 1.3 million barrels per day. So, how do you defeat a petro-dictator like Putin? And two of the main ways, which Trump now appears to be doing. One, by strangling the lifeline, the oil money, and two, by getting Ukraine the weapons it needs, finally. Denmark has just bought $500 million worth of US weapons, which are set for Ukraine. And yeah, it's transactional. Trump doesn't have a charitable bone in his body, but it works. And Europe certainly has the scratch to be able to afford it. And there are historical parallels to all of this. In World War II, the Allies bombed Nazi oil refineries, and the Ukrainians bomb Russian ones today. We saw a couple of days ago one go up in flames. And in the Cold War, President Reagan flooded the market with cheap oil, which was one of the many reasons the Soviet Union eventually got bankrupt and collapsed. And let's not forget the World War II Lend-Lease program from the United States to my country, Britain, and others, was not charity. That was a debt that was only paid in the early 2000s. So the idea to undercut Russian oil prices, flood the market with cheaper alternatives, deprive Moscow of revenue, and arm up Ukraine has parallels. This has been done before. But Trump is no stranger to erratic foreign policy. Recently, this pivot has come, and perhaps that's thanks to Melania, his wife, who is from Eastern Europe herself, knows what Russia's about. You can always trust an Eastern European to know what Russia is. And according to him, reminds him, after he's just had a good conversation with Russian dictator Putin, she'll often say, oh, the Russians just bombed another Ukrainian city. And there are other actors, Marco Rubio being one within the White House, who are pro-Ukraine. So Trump is proposing tariffs on countries that import Russian crude. This is what he wrote on Truth Social, targeting India. India is not only buying massive amounts of Russian oil, they are then, for much of the oil purchased, selling it on the open market for big profits. They don't care how many people in Ukraine are being killed by the Russian war machine. Because of this, I'll be substantially raising the tariff paid by India to the USA. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President DJT. What? Thank you for the attention to this matter. It's an odd phrase. And the Russian war machine, describing it as that, that's not something he's going to be easily be able to row back on. What are you doing? He's a strange lizard. He's not going to be able to come back from that very easily. But this is President Trump, Teflon Trump. Things just sort of bounce off of him. He has warned of imposing tariffs of up to 100% on countries that continue to purchase Russian oil unless Moscow agrees to a peace deal with Ukraine by August 8th, which is coming up in but a few days. And he's also vowing to unleash American energy, flood global markets of US oil, and bring down prices. Of course, alongside this, he's accusing the Biden administration of being soft on Russia by allowing Russian oil to continue to reach global buyers via loopholes such as the shadow fleet. And that's typical Trump theater. But he's not wrong. Biden era policies left a lot of loopholes open and are rightly criticized. But whatever his motives, and let's be real here, they're not in favor of freedom and democracy, he has realized that oil is Putin's Achilles heel. So, Trump's oil tariff plan could work in three ways. One, by driving down global prices, flooding the market with US oil, making Russian oil less profitable. Two, closing import loopholes that allow Russian oil to reach Western markets via third parties. Things like the shadow fleet, things like India buying Russian oil, repackaging it, and then selling it on. And then three, of course, pressuring buyers like India and China by threatening secondary sanctions or tariffs. It's aggressive, based on the market, and it's something that Biden's team was hesitant to pursue. Some critics say it could backfire by hurting US allies, spark a trade war, well, Trump's no stranger to that, and undermine climate goals. Still, if the objective is to starve the Kremlin, which it is, this is one of the few strategies that has significant teeth. So, how have India and China responded? Well, defiantly. A spokesperson for India's foreign ministry said in response that India will, quote, take all necessary measures to safeguard its national interests and economic security. And they added, the targeting of India is unjustified and unreasonable. And over the weekend, two Indian government sources told Reuters that India will keep purchasing from Russia despite Trump's threats. And China, for its place, made its position unambiguous. On X, the foreign ministry wrote, quote, China will ensure its energy supply in ways that serve our national interests. Coercion and pressuring will not achieve anything. But at least with India, perhaps the outward message isn't reflecting reality. As of early August 2025, well, now, several major state oil refiners, including Indian Oil, BPCL, HPCL and MRPL have stopped purchasing Russian crude on the spot market altogether. So is this a serious anti-Putin strategy? Maybe. An arrow in the quiver. And Trump's tack seems to have changed from, as I said earlier, calling President Zelensky a dictator to authorizing Australian M1 Abrams tanks to go to Ukraine, authorizing Patriot systems to go to Ukraine, and selling weapons to Europe to go to Ukraine. And bear in mind that under American military export rules, if a country buys American weapons, like Australia bought these M1 Abrams, it no longer needs, it requires American permission to sell or give them to a third party. And that permission was given because it had to be. It was blocked for a little bit, but now they're in Ukraine. And this is a significant thing. And I'm no friend of Trump, don't get me wrong, but it's progress. And now this, hitting Russia and its oil wallet, it looks promising and interestingly is appealing to Trump's to Trump's base, which is following his tack, as they often do, slightly cultish mentality, increasingly anti-Russia. We have a few days until Trump's ceasefire deadline to Russia ends. That is August 8th. Many of these deadlines have come and gone before, and what he does now will be a real test of his seriousness. Let's hope he follows through. And the war will not end unless we're serious about hurting Russia wherever we can. This includes more weapons to Ukraine, maintaining and strengthening sanctions on Russia and secondary sanctions on countries that send military aid to Russia, sell military equipment to Russia. And as Trump finally appears to be doing, closing these loopholes around oil and targeting the oil money. And that's where Putin is most vulnerable. And that's where we can really make it sting. And thank you for watching. This has been Dictators v Democrats. My wonderful co-host is climbing up my arm. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe so Erik can get more treats. And always remember, democracy is non-negotiable. What do you think? Yeah, he agrees. Erik, look at the camera. You're a good boy.